order at 7 o'clock. Dr. McGee, roll call, please.
Chairman Bourget,
Here.
Vice Chair Burke,
Here.
Mrs. Kapiskis,
Here.
Mrs. Costa, Mr. Leclerc.
Here.
I'd ask all of us to join in a moment of silence as we think about the victims of COVID and all the folks who are sick, regardless of disease. Thank you. And I'll recite the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Notoriani, do we have anyone signed up for good and welfare?
Yes, Chairman, we have Lisa Reynoso and Joanna Stepien.
Then I will ask Mrs. Is it Reynoso?
I believe it's Reynoso or Stepien.
Well, I'm inviting you to speak to the school committee. State your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes to address the committee.
Hi, I'm Delisa Reynoso, the Secretary of the Senior Class National Honor Society.
And I'm Joanna Stepien, the Senior Class Vice President of the National Honor Society.
And on behalf of the National Honor Society, we would like to invite you, the school committee, to our senior induction. The induction will be held on Thursday, June 3rd at 6 p.m. We are planning to either have it indoors or outdoors. We are not sure yet, but we will let you know. And we were just wondering if it would be okay for us to share our screen to show the invitation.
Sure.
And that is all we have. Thank you.
That's fantastic. I look forward to it. Look forward to attending.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.
Here we are. Yeah. It was just those two young ladies, Mr. Notoriani?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay. Next, we'll go into recognition and announcements, and I'll turn it over to you, Dr. McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have about 3 items that I would like to discuss briefly. First, I want to start off with Learning Walk. So here in the Woonsocket Education Department, even though we've gone through, for the last year and few months, the COVID pandemic, we have continued our focus on teaching and learning across the district. And one area that we've continued our focus of teaching and learning and leading is are in learning walks. Learning walks are opportunities for principals, assistant principals, directors to go into classrooms. We've been working with a group called the Teaching and Learning Alliance. You're probably familiar with them. They worked with us on our district strategic plan. So we've partnered with them this year, and we've also partnered with them next year to conduct these learning walks with the purpose of improving teaching, learning, and also leading. This year, we've focused on basically going in and looking at 3 areas of instruction: the quality of questions that teachers and staff ask, student interaction, as well as assessment criteria that are used in classrooms. And the purpose this year has really been for the administrative piece, is for our administrators and our directors to be on the same page with respect to looking at what best practice of teaching and learning look like. So it's been exciting. The work started actually in the beginning of the year. We have conducted learning walks at the Career Center, Coleman Elementary, Vernon Heights Elementary, Harris Elementary, Hamlet, and Villanova Middle Schools. We will be conducting our learning walks later this year at the high school, at the Pothier Citizens Campus, at Savoy Elementary, and Globe Park Elementary. So it's exciting work. It's been very challenging, however, this year due to COVID. There haven't been as many students in classrooms, but we've really, I think, gotten a lot out of the process, and I'm excited, as well as the administrators and directors here in the district on what we're going to be conducting next year. Secondly, I want to make an announcement. Sodexo Food Service will be providing a free 7-day pack-out meal for children and families. Children under 18 years are eligible to receive the meal pack. Thursday, April 22nd, next Thursday, from 11 to 1:30 p.m. There will be pickup designated spots at both Woonsocket High School and Hamlet Middle School. And again, families can go and they will pick up food for the following weekend and week. So for the upcoming vacation, families will have an opportunity this week to pick up their meals for this weekend as well as the vacation week. And then as I said, on the 22nd, they'll have an opportunity to pick up their meals for the following weekend and the week that we come back from our vacation. And again, it's going to be at Woonsocket High School and Hamlet Middle School, and the time is from 11 to 1:30. And finally, I just want to wish everyone a very safe and happy and healthy spring break, and we look forward to seeing everyone back after our spring vacation is ended. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have this evening.
Any school committee member have any comments or questions for Dr. McGee? Then I'll make a motion to receive and place on file the recognitions and announcements. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Burke. Dr. McGee, roll call.
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Leclerc.
Yes.
Next, I'll make a motion to approve the March 24, 2021 open session minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Burke. Are there any additions, deletions, corrections to the minutes?
Good.
Hearing none. Hearing none. Dr. McGee.
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Leclerc.
Yes.
Next, I'll make a motion to approve the April 6, 2021 special meeting open session minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Burke. Any corrections, deletions, amendments to the minutes? Dr. McGee.
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Leclerc.
Yes.
Next, I'll make let's go into the consent agenda, and I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa, and I think Vice Chair Burke.
Okay.
Does any committee member want to take any items out of the consent agenda or any discussion of any item?
Nope.
Dr. McGee?
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Leclerc.
Yes.
Next, we'll go into communications. I've been looking forward to this presentation. Dr. McGee, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as you are all aware, I think it was a couple of school committee meetings ago, I believe it was Mr. Burke that requested that Mr. Bill Webb, who is the director of the Woonsocket Area Career and Technical Center, provide a brief presentation on both the data as it relates to the Career Center and the programs that we offer at the Career Center, as well as the P-TECH program that we offer our students once they become ninth graders at Woonsocket High School. So I am going to turn the presentation over to Mr. Webb, who is going to go through it. Bill?
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman Bourget, School Committee, Dr. McGee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the incredible work that we do here at the Career Center and the dynamic staff that we have that makes this all happen. One of the focal points of our staff is everybody talks about the student-centered, but we're actually person-centered. We look at the person that's sitting in that seat, and not necessarily the students that are sitting in that seat. Today, I submitted to Ms. Blaze on Friday basically 2 reports. The first report had all the outlines, and there's a link in that report to the CLNA, which is the Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment. That Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment was something that had to be done at the end of last year, and is a deep dive into all the data. So whatever I talk about tonight, you go to the Comprehensive Local Needs Assessment, you'll see some real deep dive. And the whole point of that was to find out what we do well, what we need to improve on, and how to target our Perkins money and state and federal dollars to improve what we have to do at the Career Center. I know I was specifically asked by Mr. Burke to talk about P-TECH. You know, P-TECH really is a combination of 2 things. It is our computer science program, which we had in existence. We've beefed it up since then with the help of CBS and a couple of colleges. But we also married it to an academic class. So it's more of a model that you would find in Massachusetts and some of the other states that do really well. And basically, we're trying to take this model, prepare students for college, prepare students for careers, but putting the 2 of them together really work out well. And to be honest with you, I know if you've looked at the list, you'll see a ton of accomplishments that we put for P-TECH. But those accomplishments, if you had asked me about any other program, you would have gotten basically the same type of list. All those things are things that our teachers make sure that their programs are getting to for the benefit of our students. All our programs offer college credits. All our programs, excuse me 1 second. Yep. All our programs offer work-based learning. We're supposed to get 80 hours per student by the time they graduate from us. And all our programs service our community. For example, Child Studies does the pre-K. They also send internships into the elementary schools and the high schools to help out our school district. Our graphics department does district printing, city printing, fire and police printing, plus nonprofits. Our health program works in the Woonsocket Health and Rehabilitation Center, Landmark Hospital, all the offshoots of Landmark Hospital, and the small offices such as allergies and dentists. So we help out there. Hospitality this year submitted as senior projects 3 plans for graduation. They submitted them to Mr. Henderson, and they worked all first semester on that, so that way we wouldn't be caught like we were caught last year. Let's see. Construction, we know they do the sheds, picnic tables, they work with the city, they help build stuff. We've produced 55 picnic tables for the Rotary. Culinary, we all are aware of culinary. I mean, you guys have tasted their cuisine, and they service there. They've gone down and worked with the state and water fire. Are you guys getting a feedback too on this? No? Okay, good.
No, it sounds good.
Perfect, thank you. Auto Tech, they service the city district, city vehicles, they service our district vehicles. We also take in community vehicles and people want to have service done. Computer science works with CVS and does internships. Mr. Notarani has been helpful in us. We set up a help desk to help out our tech department and service them. Digital media produces community holiday cards. Every Christmas time, people come in, get families and get this and get them at a very reasonable price. Biotechnology produces farm fresh vegetables for everybody. Plus they do testing on it to see which one's more nutritious, those grown in soil or those grown through a hydroponic. So that's just a brief overview of all the things that we do. That document highlights all the credentials our students can get. We're monitored by the state. We get audited by the state to make sure that we're following and meeting our criteria. It's not just following it. We have to meet certain criteria in order for our programs to stay in existence. And our teachers do a great job in doing that. Our students are wonderful. They're dynamite. I mean, it's great to have them back, actually. So I did share a report with you, and I didn't know whether you wanted me to share and my screen to go over the report, or do you want me to stop here and ask me some questions? Whatever you want to do.
I would like to see, why don't you share your report and just hit the highlights for us? Because I know
Okay.
I know Mr. Burke and I know I had questions regarding, how many students we have and where it's going. So I would, please, share your screen, Bill.
Okay, perfect. And I skipped over something. According to our calculations, we have 765 students that are attending the Career Center, but that includes also the iExplore program, which is dynamic, and the home building and architecture program. Those are both exploratory classes. So that's over 700 students that are
Wow.
currently attending. So I will share this with you right now. Let me know when you see it.
See it?
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So everything in blue, this will link to our website so you can check them out.
Okay.
Here is all bookmarked, so you can click right into that. These give you an overview of PTEC, so you can get a deeper understanding of what it is. It's a couple of videos that were produced by ABC News. This was produced by the governor of our program, about our programs. And this is our PTEC overview that we had produced for our open houses. Here's some of the outlines. And like I said, this list is fairly comprehensive, but there's many things that we didn't hit on. But I could produce this list for any program that we have. College credits at this point, amongst all the students, we've issued over 300 college credits. The difference is they're transferable college credits. So the student doesn't necessarily have to go to the school that issued the credit. They can actually take the credit and go to another school. We have students looking at, Worcester Polytech, some of the top schools. So they're not even going to go to CCRI. They're going to other schools that they're already being accepted into. We had 17 students, this is before COVID, that were able to do paid internships as juniors and a couple of seniors at CVS, and they were making 12 and change an hour working at CVS. And we were doing a rotation. We were really getting into that. We would have had much more had this whole thing hadn't happened. Two of our students earned the Rhode Island Civic Leadership Award from the Secretary of State. Our team came in, competed nationally, finished first in the state for Cyber Patriot, the girls Cyber Patriots. So, we do a whole boatload of stuff with us, and all our programs take field trips, internships, job shadows. We have a ton of guest speakers coming in. We have a new system called NEPRIS, which allows us to pull from industry experts across the country to come in and talk to our students virtually. And it's really not just coming in, but there's a whole series of questions and follow-up material that the students have to be. So it's a deep dive into what that career is all about and where they're going about. Let's see. So so this is all 30 of them. Like I said, you have that piece of information. So
Yes.
if you have any questions at this, you can go. Our partnerships here, CVS, PTEC USA, Rhode Island Commerce, CT Board and Trust, colleges, several of them. We work with Summit and Highlander to make it all work together. They also work with other programs. So, URI courses are offered in other programs. And our English teacher is actually a teacher that teaches it. Our projections for next year, I'm sure this is where you want to get to. So these are projections based on retention to where we are at this point in time. We talked to the teachers a month ago, and we've talked to them again. As the quarter ends, we will talk to them again. They're seeing a fairly high retention rate, which is good. Our recruiting was a little off this year. And we've been doing cafeteria duty. I've been talking to some of the 9th grade students. Because they were at home, they didn't know these opportunities were available to them. And so we're going to reach back out to the 9th grade. We have Good Shepherd coming down from in the end of May. Mr. Lamro has been working on Good Shepherd to get them down to our school. And we're going to be talking to the 9th graders. We also talked to Kim and Jen. They're going to be bringing up some of the 8th graders to the Career Center. So even though the numbers were down, we felt that we'll still make some inroads to them. And if we're able to retain, we're in solid shape here. So these are the numbers that we have. Do you want me to go a little further, or do you want to ask questions about this first?
I guess in speaking with Vice Chair Burke, after we got your presentation, one of the things that he noted was some extensive advertising by some of the other career centers. So maybe I'm going to ask him to address that, because he's the one who saw the additional advertising, and maybe something we want to do. Vice Chair Burke.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, I raised this issue a couple of meetings ago, and please, you need to understand, several years ago when we were debating whether the Woonsocket Education Department was going to take over the Career Center from the state, and if you remember, there was no committee member at that time who was more vocal than I was in making sure that we took over the Career Center from the state. I was the one that spoke in front of the city council to get their vote. So you got to understand, I'm a great fan of the Career Center, but I was concerned a couple of weeks ago when I began to see some of the numbers going away from our Career Center to other schools, and I became intrigued to find out what are our numbers, are we staying competitive, what is it we need to do? For example, I do know that P-TECH begins with 50 students. Each cohort was 50. We're down to 38 and 30 in 2 cohorts. Question is, what's happening, how that happened, what can we do to try and avoid that in the future? And obviously the other numbers are what they are. What Chairman Bourget referred to is that I saw a TV ad on local news pushing a P-TECH program. I'm sorry, a Career Center program. In fact, I saw the same ad several times over several days. To me, that's great advertisement, and it's great recruiting. I've also seen many print ads for P-TECH. Now, I know, Mr. Webb, you have placed some ads in some of the local papers over the years. Just, again, since I mentioned those 2 things about the TV ads, I'm just wondering how much more we can do to sell our program, to retain our students, so we're not losing them. Dr. McGee has said that some of this loss occurred during the summer before, so he didn't think the pandemic played a role. I don't know. It may have thwarted our attempt at recruiting because of the pandemic. I do notice now that you're opening up the program to 9th graders. Now, obviously, that's going to help. That's going to help the numbers. And obviously, as you sell the program, I'm sure you're going to double check to make sure that they're ready to enter this type of course of study. So basically, that's where I was coming from, just to see the numbers, to see where it's working, and to see what we need to do. Now, I noticed you had several pages of your presentation where you talked about some things that you saw the need to work on. Action items you mentioned. So I think that those are all good approaches, and maybe those are some things that we need to make sure that we work on. So that was the motivation for my asking the question, to just examine the data, to see where it's working and where it's not, and to try and do the best we can. Obviously, it's not 100%, but the best we can to try and keep our numbers up. Because I know this is a great program. I know that. I've seen it at the banquets every year over the last several years. I know how great the teachers are. I know how great the students are. and we just want to make sure that we are getting as much as we can. And I
Sure.
think
So-
that's basically what I was trying to say.
So to answer these as they come across, so the P-TECH numbers, students joined that because at the time they wanted, we were taking in 50, but it is a computer science piece. And they thought they were coming in to do gaming, but the students that left the P-TECH program went to other programs within our building or back to the high school. I don't know of one student that left us out of P-TECH and went to another district. A large percentage of the students that we're losing to the other district is Good Shepherd, and we've reached out. We went and did a presentation in September to Good Shepherd. They're coming over again now. We do have some students that signed up from Good Shepherd, so we have been addressing that. Some of this that you're talking about, Mr. Burke, is going to be addressed by the legislation that you will find at the very end of the document. Those three pieces of legislation are when passed, will put us back to the foundation that we were at before, that if we have a program, they can't leave us to go to another place that has the same program. They can choose wherever they want to go,
Yep.
which is a disadvantage for us at this point.
Yep.
Dollars for, I believe we spent close to $19,000 in advertising last year. We were on Channel 10 News. We were on all the newspapers. We did mailings. We did a series of open house videos, which we will be able to use as we roll them out. And next year, bring them back together to do for our open house that will run in, the end of October, beginning of November. Also, we're planning on bringing Good Shepherd down in September. We're bringing the middle school over in September, so that way they can be available for our open house. The migration, our numbers are, at the Career Center continue to improve. So, when we're losing students, some of it's this year, I don't like disagreeing with my boss, but this year, some of the students are not knowing what's going on. And so us not having them to be able to come over and see what's going on, to bring them from the middle schools to the school and to the high school has hurt us because they don't have that feel for what's really going on there. I think, P-TECH, we've been promoted statewide on that. We did pick up one or two out-of-district students from the NBC News advertising that we did. We did just pick up another Burrillville student this morning. So, we are making some of those headways. We want to retain who we have, and I think the iExplore will do a tremendous job at that, because the teams that have been assembled in middle school right now, very dynamic. We had a meeting last night on them. So getting those students to see what we have inside of Woonsocket, and to have our students, the whole intention is for our students to go down into the middle school and talk to those students. So now the student has a more relatable feel for where they can go and what they can do. They're going to be able to come over to the Career Center and see our programs. And when we expand the CTE programs at the high school, they'll be able to see those too. So I agree, we did lose too many students. That's not a question. That was a main adjustment for going down in the 9th grade immediately this year. The plan was to do that next year because we have done that over the last couple of years. We opened up one program, then we opened up another program. So this year was an all-out, let's open all the programs up to it for all the 8th graders to apply to come in. So that really did bring the numbers up. So that's why I'm kind of optimistic that when we are able to talk to the 9th graders that are in person, like I did in the cafeteria for the last couple of days, those 9th graders are like, oh yeah, and I got names and emails from a couple of them that we're going to reach out to. And once you get that ball rolling, and then in May, we'll be bringing them over. Usually we use the English class to do so. But we also use Success 101 to do so, which is Mr. Henderson's program. So those students can come over and make their changes there You know, so when we're looking at that, I think it's an awareness issue inside our district. You know, we have home building and architecture. The reason we have that there instead of calling it construction is because a few years ago, I do surveys of the middle school students all the time. We found that we had 12 or 15 students sign up for construction, but we had 60 students sign up for home building once I put it in. It was because they didn't know what construction was. So we just add a name to it so they get a better idea, because they were thinking buildings. They weren't thinking home. They weren't thinking construction. They weren't thinking electricity. They weren't thinking plumbing, you know, the green world. So, you know, so once we do that, I think when the legislation comes in, we expand, you know, we'd really like to get a business program in there. We'd really like to get law and society in there before the legislation goes through, because those are nice pieces for us to have that would, once the legislation goes through, gives us a check. So students that want something in particular, I know, you know, Mr. Perrier you know, they will be pulling requests from the other schools to make sure students aren't leaving us and then changing what they're doing over there, that they're staying in the programs that they said they were going for. So we want to make sure we follow up on that. So we've done a ton of advertising and a ton of work on that end of it. It was just a real tough year.
Sure.
I think we spent more than we should have, but I think we had to for this year because of the situation. And even now we're finding with all that we did, I think I sent out 7 different types of communications home to parents and students. And yet when I'm talking to students, they just weren't listening to it. They didn't get, not all, you know, a lot of them got it because we did do well in the numbers. I think there's still room to boost that up. As far as the action items go, you know, we put in biotech, Kaylin Mather, dynamite teacher. She went off the PLTW. So now our biotech is called Biotech Biomedical. That is what other schools have. As soon as the legislation goes through, if they want that program, they have to stay with us. You know, we did the 9th grade thing. We're accepting all 9th graders. We'd like to do an exit survey of all.
Mr. Webb, I was going to say, I know, aren't we in the 2nd year of the I Explore program in the middle school? And that's going to pay off. I think what you referred to that, I think that will pay off down the road. So that was good that we started that. And now this is going to be the feeder program. And I can understand now why 9th graders would be more acceptable. So, sorry.
And the other thing, Mr. Burke, about the I Explore program, that's one of the pieces of legislation. And we're already doing it. We're ahead of the game as far as that is. People are calling us, asking us what we're doing across the state. So because we're already modeling what the CT Board and Trust in the state of Rhode Island would like to see happen at the middle school. We're actually allocating Perkins funds to our I Explore programs at the middle school. So they're going to be really robust. And with the teachers that they have there, the meeting yesterday was awesome. We've met the week before with one half of them. We're meeting next week with the other half. So we're on board with that. Karen Barboza is doing a spectacular job keeping them in line and bringing them on board and making sure we're on target with where we're going with all of that. So I think we've got some dynamic teachers in place. We just got to let some of this stuff play out a little bit more and continue to push our name out there, continue to push our reputation of who we are. You know, we go back 7 years ago, they were building a charter school, a green charter school, because nobody even considered the Career Center. And now when you turn around, we're doing stuff for everybody around because that's the first thing they're thinking about. So our teachers did a real good job putting us out there. Our students, every time we ask for them to do something, they come through. I'm bringing up that thing. So the top sheet of the action items are things we've been working on. Heidi and Allison, the career coordinators, they put together a nice packet for us to get ready to push on the business pathway and the law and society pathway. We have to identify a teacher for each. We have one for business. We have to identify that law and society person because they have to own that program. Our programs, our teachers are passionate about what they're teaching. And it makes a huge difference because they're there weekends. You know, we're always on the phone with each other. But we need to put those two pieces in place. And Brad and I have talked a little bit about different ways of doing that. Mr. Henderson and I have had conversations about how to do that. So we're moving in that direction. Down below, additional opportunities are things that we put into place that are ideas to start kicking around now. Those are things that we do. Personally, Dr. McGee doesn't like it when I say this. I personally would like to add an addition to the backside of our building. I would like to go 3 stories high, go out to the back parking lot, put a bank on the bottom, Navigant's willing to work with us, take the Career Center cafe, move it down there, and then incorporate all academics with our career programs. Now we would have a true model like the Worcester model. Like I did a lot of the accreditations for the graphics programs in Massachusetts, and this is what they do. They tie their academics to the programs. So you'd have math and English and science and history teachers teaching to the health and human sciences, but they'd all be talking about the same thing. So the teachers all have something in common. The kids now understand why math works a certain way, why the English is so important. So they have all that. So truly, that's the optimum, is to add that addition to the back of the building. We could go down 1 story, up 1 story. It would house everybody. It would really be a mark for Woonsocket to have something like that on there. And again, that's my dream. Sorry. But,
Now, Mr. Webb, I think dreams are good to have because this district certainly doesn't let the the grass grow under our feet. And it's something that we'll be contemplating. So I want to thank you for this presentation, but I want to ask any other school committee member have any questions or comments for Mr. Webb? Mr. Webb, I want to thank you for this report and for the materials you provided. This was very good, and it's something we'll keep dear to our hearts and monitor the progress. We look forward to the next time we'll have you go through this.
Me too. Thank you.
Can I also say thank you to Mr. Bourget? I just want to thank Mr. Webb for putting this together. It was at my request, and I do appreciate all the work that you put in. And obviously, this is information we got to keep sharing to really realize the greatness that was seeking. So once again, thank you.
Thank you very much, and have a good night.
You too. Yep. I will make a motion to receive and place on file the Career Center report. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa and Vice Chair Burke. Dr. McGee?
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Leclerc.
Yes.
Mr. Webb, may I ask you to unshare your screen?
Whoops. Yes. As soon as I figure out how to do
I
that.
see myself like I'm in double now. There we go. Here we are.
Here we go.
Sorry about that.
Thank you so much, Bill. Great job.
Good job.
Great job.
Thank you.
Next, I'll ask Dr. McGee to give us his superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, before I start my report, I just want to thank Bill for a fantastic presentation this evening, and I also want to congratulate him on his leadership at the Career Center, and I also want to recognize the amazing teachers and staff that we have at the Career Center, and most importantly, the incredible students that we have there. As you know, some members of the school committee have had the honor to attend their awards ceremony at the end of the school year, and it's always a wonderful ceremony, and it's just obvious that there is a real family atmosphere, and very proud of the work that our students, all of our high school students, do. and certainly the programs at the Career Center. I'm going to start my report with some personnel matters. We recently hired a resource teacher assistant at Citizens Memorial School that's paid locally. We also have hired a total of 9 before and or after school student support staff who will be receiving their teachers within the district, who will be receiving stipends to work with our students who are, in various situations academically, so that we can hopefully ramp them up as much as we can. The second item on my report are the end of year events, an update. So first, let me just let the committee know that at each level, at the high school, the Career Center, the middle schools, and our elementary schools, our administrators and their subcommittees are working on those plans. They're working on those plans so that they'll be submitting them to me soon. I also want to let you know that the Department of Health and Department of Education just recently, yesterday, released their new guidance for end-of-year school-sponsored spring events. And specifically, again, we're talking about kindergarten and grade 5 promotion ceremonies, grade 8 promotion ceremonies, and end-of-year dance, as well as high school proms, award ceremonies, and graduation and the Career Center award ceremony as well. So I'm just going to speak briefly about the playbook that was issued yesterday. I shared this playbook with all of the principals and assistant principals and directors so that as they continue to work on their plans, they're adhering to the guidelines from the Department of Health and Rhode. And again, I'm just going to point out a few things here. Schools are going to be responsible for creating planning teams, which I think many, if not all, of our schools have already begun. Each planning team is going to be responsible for creating a COVID-19 control plan, and there's actually a link through the Department of Education that each of those teams will be utilizing when they put those formal plans together. And again, those plans will be going to myself, the school department, as well as the Department of Education. With respect to the capacity of venues and spaces as we move into the spring, there are some guidelines that have been released. So I'm going to start with proms or events where food is going to be served. And as you can imagine, the proms that we have, there is food, naturally. They would be catered. So there are windows of time where the number of or the capacity is changing. So let me start again with any event in which food is served. If those events are scheduled between May 15th and June 3rd, 150 can attend in an indoor venue. An outdoor venue, the max is 250. And again, these are events that are served, that would be catered, and that there will be food. From June 4th on to basically the end of the school year, or in some cases, there are some districts that hold proms after graduation. That number increases to 200 indoors to 300 outdoors. If you look at any type of an event where there's not going to be food served, from May 15th to June 3rd, you can have 500 people indoors and up to 1,000 outdoors. June 4th and on, you can have 500 indoors and 2,000 outdoors. So what does this mean, really? Specifically, I'm going to look at the high school. When we look at the proms, and I know that high school leadership team and other subcommittees have been putting together these plans and are currently putting these plans together. As I said earlier, they're looking at, they might be looking at indoor venues as well as outdoor venues. So basically, if there's food that's served, as we move into June, we can have more students attend these events. Again, as I said, it goes from 250 outdoor to 300. Specifically graduation, where we don't serve food, we typically have a concession stand that's open, but we would not be providing that concession stand. You can have up to 2,000 people outdoors. And again, that falls into the scheduling of our graduation, which is scheduled for Friday, June 18th. At these events that are going to be scheduled, all who attend will need to be pre-screened. And that pre-screening process is something that we've been utilizing since really the beginning of the school year, when we had staff and students returning to our schools. And that's just a checklist that we utilize, that we've utilized from the Department of Health, that most school districts are using. But that's something that we would have to utilize for all attendees to those various events. With respect to proms, again, when I refer to a prom, I'm saying that it would be a catered event. All attendees must present a negative COVID test from a sample that's been collected 48 hours, no more than 48 hours prior to the event. So students who attend that event and staff who attend that event would need to present a negative COVID test from that 48 hours or no more than 48 hours, as I said, regardless of a vaccination. Schools are going to have to develop plans for screening attendees, as I said. So that's part of that plan that they're going to need to put together, that will be submitted to the district as well as to the Department of Education. All attendees will be required to wear masks throughout the event. And again, this includes a prom, and it also includes graduation. Graduates will be seated as in stable groups. I'm sorry, with respect to the proms, students would be seated in tables of stable groups. So when they're dancing, they would need to dance with their stable group. If they're on the dance floor, they also need to maintain a distance of 6 feet between stable groups. At graduation, the graduates would be seated again where they normally are seated on the field, but they would have to be seated at least 3 feet from one another. Also, with respect to the graduation, when visitors will attend, and visitors will be able to attend, we'll determine the number of visitors that can attend the graduation. They will need to be seated in their family or group pods, and they would have to be 6 feet from other groups as well. So we would be utilizing, for Barry Field, if you're looking at what that would look like, we'd be utilizing, certainly both sets of stands, and we would have to sort of resituate the stage. But again, those are all plans that are being put together by the various subcommittees at the high school. And with respect to the handling of diplomas at graduation, diplomas cannot be handed hand to hand. So the high school will be looking at a process by which the students would receive their diploma prior to, and they would walk to the stage with their diploma. Unfortunately, handshaking won't be permitted, and then the student would walk across the stage, back to their seat as we normally would during a traditional year. And I want to preface again that these guidelines are not Woonsocket Education Department guidelines. These are Rhode and Rhode guidelines, and all districts in the state will be required to follow these guidelines with respect to any of those end-of-year events, including proms and graduations. So I'm going to stop there for questions before I get to my third agenda item. Any school committee member has any questions or comments?
Dr. McGee, when we discussed it, didn't you mention something about photo stations
Yeah.
after they walk off? Maybe you want to just speak a little bit to
Sure.
that, so the folks can hear.
So the graduates, as I said, will be wearing their masks. They can take their masks off when they are taking a photo. So in years past, we've set up a couple of stations at Barry Field where we've had sort of the Woonsocket High School logo. You know, it's been a large vinyl banner, and you know, graduates and their families are able to take photos in front of those. So I think what we would probably do this year is to accommodate the number who would want to be photographed, you know, with their diploma. We would expand, I'm sure, the number of those areas where graduates and their families could take photos. They still have to maintain social distancing when they take those photos as well.
Mhm.
From pod to pod, obviously not with their family.
Mr. Henderson, do you want to add to that, to what Dr. McGee's been talking about for the high school end of year events?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. He's pretty solid in his description. You know, the different subcommittees, as he mentioned, have been meeting, and they've been pretty spot on with the ideas on, you know, the end of year activities. The actual playbook has provided or will provide them with some specific guidelines now, because there were a lot of things that were in the air. Dr. McGee and I hadn't even had a conversation as to creating more stations for the pictures. However, if you look at the guidance or some of the ideas that the folks of the committee were having, it was to create some more of those areas. So, you know, we're all in a line with the same conversations, but now that we have this playbook, we can be more specific with how we can channel our thoughts.
Excellent. Anyone else for Dr. McGee? Dr. McGee,
Mr. Chair?
Mrs. Costa.
Yes, I just have a couple of questions. So do you guys have any idea of what you're leaning towards, like more of an outdoor for proms or an indoor venue? Are you guys leaning towards maybe waiting until after that June 4th so we can accommodate a little bit more students? Is there a way we can do like an A and B day kind of thing to accommodate them?
Well, the whole thing with the proms is creating or establishing the venue right now, right? Because you have to get those venues now. So again, you know, the class advisor has, you know, he's had an indoor venue as well as an outdoor venue, depending on what these guidelines were going to look like. So of course we can now make it much more specific. So we did have an A and a B, but the majority of our events, with the exception of probably National Honor Society, we're thinking about having them outdoors to accommodate more students. The only concerns with some of the awards is we don't have lights at Barry Field. So a lot of our events, if you talk about award ceremonies and so on and so forth, are usually in the PM, which will accommodate families to be able to get there. So that's a concern, because we don't have the lights, and when you try to just project on a screen in the daytime, it's difficult. So these are the things that we have to take into consideration. But again, you know, now we can circle back and have more streamlined conversations now that we have guidelines that we need to follow, as opposed to just throwing it out there, many or several ideas.
Okay, and then the other question that I have is, so before, obviously, you know, during proms, we were, you know, students are allowed to ask people outside of the district if they, you know, wanted to go with them to their prom. Is that still being allowed, or is that not being allowed?
As of right now, it may not be able to be allowed this year based on the number and also the size of our graduating class, right? If we have, you know, 300 students or 250 students, seniors that want to attend, then we want to accommodate all of our seniors to attend their prom. So as of right now, the answer is no, there won't be any outsiders. But if we don't get students to want to attend, then we're going to open it up to allow their friends in a different grade level or outside of the school to attend.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Dr. McGee? you may want to continue with your report.
Sure. So my third and final agenda item is just an update on the contract negotiations. So we have met a total of 2 times with the Woonsocket Teachers Guild. We have our 3rd meeting scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, and we're just going to continue to schedule the meetings. And, our hope is that we will, come to an agreement with the teacher's contract as soon as possible, because we also have 2 other contracts to negotiate, which is the 1137, Local 1137, which is our custodians, maintenance, and secretarial staff. And then we have, of course, our paraprofessionals. So, we're working hard at the process. It takes time. It certainly doesn't happen overnight, but I'm hopeful that it won't take us too long. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Any additional comments for Dr. McGee? Then I'll make a motion to receive and place on file the superintendent's report. Is there a second?
Yes, second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. Dr. McGee, roll call.
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Leclerc.
Yes.
Now I'll ask Mrs. Kepiscus to give us the CLAC update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The CLAC met on April 1st, 2021 at 6 p.m. virtually. Meeting was called to order at 6:08 and began with self-introductions as usual. The first topic was statewide testing. Dr. McGee ran down the proposed schedule and how that was going to be handled with distance learners, because that was a particular concern to a lot of our special needs parents. A parent under new business raised 2 questions, one with regard to report cards versus progress reports, and in particular children being graded in classes from which they're excused from attending, as well as reading supports available to students with IEPs, and in particular was asking the difference between a reading interventionist and a reading specialist. We had a presentation which was arranged by Mr. Robideau at the high school. Elizabeth Champagne from ORS, the Office of Rehabilitation Services, spoke to our parents, as well as Carolee Leach from the Department of Behavioral Health, Developmental Disabilities and Hospitals, or BHDDH. Most of us know it as Buddha. Kind of an embattled agency right now. Both Carolee Leach and Elizabeth Champagne kindly offered their emails to all parents after answering questions and indicated they would be available for any future questions that parents may have. Dr. Sullivan then went on to present, as well as Mrs. Morell, about the student apartment that's being set up at the high school and the plans to have the students figure out what you need for an apartment, pots and pans, linens, tableware, etc. There's also been meetings going on with teachers with regard to summer ramp-up programs for our students. They're seeking input from parents as well. In particular, Dr. McGee also discussed the school reopening again. We went back to ESY, extended school year, and whether or not there are different plans in place. And at this point, there's a plan to potentially extend the number of hours. It would still be 3 days, so students and teachers both get some kind of summer, but maybe longer days, or increase the number of weeks. They're still working on that plan. Mr. Bourget indicated that he wanted all parents to know that the district was working on end-of-year exercises. And he also mentioned that the Woonsocket Rotary is looking to work on the Woonsocket High School auditorium, hoping to get it in tip-top shape for September 2022. The meeting adjourned with the announcement that the next virtual meeting of the CLAC is on Thursday, May 6th, 2021, 6 p.m. Meeting was adjourned at 7:37. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Kepiscus. Any questions or comments for Mrs. Kepiscus on CLAC? Then I'll make a motion to receive and place on file the CLAC update. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Burke. Dr. McGee?
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Leclerc.
Yes.
Next, we'll go into conferences and discussions, and I'll ask Mr. Notoriani to give us the facilities technology update.
Thank you, Chairman. My update will be brief. Under technology is the standard reports regarding work orders over the course of the last 30 days, along with the satisfaction report. As you can see by the report submitted, we've had several hundred work orders submitted over the last 4 weeks. Most of them are at various states. The vast majority of them have been closed and resolved. In addition to the work orders for technology, we are updating the student registration process. Currently, we have a one-step process, and we're moving over to a two-step process, and that will go live sometime after the April break. Hopefully, it makes it easier for both our parents and our staff at the schools to get students registered quicker. We are currently providing support for state assessments with the technology and the internet. And we are in the process of submitting state reports for ILP data, school health, and TCS data, which is teacher course, student, and section data that's uploaded to Rhode regularly. In facilities, you have the same reports as mentioned in technology. There are far less work orders, and they are at various states, along with a satisfaction report where green is good, yellow is where someone may have been unsatisfied or dissatisfied with the service received. And in facilities, we've been spending the last several weeks reassembling classrooms for students returning for in-person learning. We are currently short-staffed in the custodial area and backfilling with facility staff. And apparently, according to Mr. Webb, we should be working on plans to build a bank behind the Career Tech Center sometime in the near future. I'll add that to the to-do list right away, Chairman. That concludes my report. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them at this time.
I look forward to seeing you out there, Mr. Toriani, with the architects and the construction workers to build us a new addition. How's that?
Yes.
Any questions, comments from Mr. Notoriani?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Mrs. Costa, please. Hello?
I have a couple of questions. I apologize. I couldn't get it off from you. It wouldn't go off. I apologize.
Okay.
I just had a couple more questions for you. Now that we are back in person, is there a way to return computers that students weren't able to return that weren't working in the beginning of the virtual that we were doing?
That's a very good question. When we return from the break and we resume the 5-day schedule, we'll be sending out a notification to say, please bring in your equipment if you have any old equipment, and we will be repairing it and putting it back into circulation. Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. And then my second question is, are we closer to turning that Go Guardian on for parents?
So Go Guardian, the Go Guardian company, right now, we're still in negotiations with the privacy agreement with them to make sure that they comply with the state privacy laws. As soon as they will agree to sign off on the agreement and we're close, then we can just flip the switch and turn it on. So they did respond back last week, and we need to speak with our attorney to have them review what they proposed. But it's very close to being able to turn it back on.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from Mr. Notoriani? Then I'll make a motion to receive and place on file the facilities technology update. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. Dr. McGee, please.
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Leclerc.
Yes.
Now we'll go in. We have one item in unfinished business. I'll make a motion to discuss and approve the WED's academic 21-22 school year calendar for second passage. Second by Vice Chair Burke and Mrs. Costa. Do we have any further discussion on this item?
I don't think so.
Dr. McGee?
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Leclerc.
Yes.
Next, we'll go into new business. I'll make a motion to discuss and approve the Woonsocket School Committee 21-22 annual meeting calendar. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. I mean, we always vote on the school calendar, but I thought it was something that we should be looking at in voting and make sure we approve the school committee dates that we have for the upcoming year. It pretty much follows our bylaws, and I wanted to make, and we all received a copy with our agenda. Is there any discussion on this?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Kepiscus, please.
before we approve it, I just want to mention that there is one error on the calendar. It indicates our second meeting in March is on March 25th. That's a Friday. It should be March 23rd.
March 23rd. Okay. And that's in 2022. You check that.
Correct.
All right. Any other additions, corrections? Any corrections?
Nope. Looks good.
Then with that small correction, any other corrections? Anything else? So with that, just one addition, correction, Dr. McGee, please.
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Leclerc.
Yes.
Second item is I'll make a motion to discuss and approve the Thunder Mist lease at the high school. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. Dr. McGee, Mr. Perrier.
I can start, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So you have before you the proposed lease between the Woonsocket Education Department and Thunder Mist Health Center. Some of you might be familiar with the Thunder Mist Health Center at Woonsocket High School. It's also called the Health Hut. They have been at Woonsocket High School for many, many years. And this is just a lease that we typically sign with them so that they can utilize the space in Woonsocket High School, which is adjoined to our current health suite, our nurse's office, and examining areas. The work that the folks from Thunder Mist do and the partnership that they have with us, as I said, goes back many, many years. And it's an opportunity for our students and our students' families to access a variety of primary care, diagnosis, treatment of illness, school physical examinations, immunizations, social workers, school psychologists, health, reproductive health education, family planning, just a whole plethora of opportunities for our high school students and their families to take advantage of right in Woonsocket High School. Much of what they provide is what's provided locally in the city through Thunder Mist. And as I said, we just have a very strong relationship and partnership with them. I would also like to add to this as well, as aside from this particular lease. I don't know if any of you are aware, certainly some folks out there might be aware that years ago when we were in the old middle school, we had a health hut that was located there. And unfortunately, in approximately 2010, when we moved from the old middle school to the two new middle schools, the funding ran out, the grant funding ran out through the state, and we had to close that health hut at Woonsocket Middle School. We now have an opportunity before us, and again, this is an aside, but we have an opportunity to open up another health hut at one of the two middle schools through hopefully a grant that Thunder Mist is going to receive. So we've been in conversations with them about the possibility of expanding back to Woonsocket Middle School. But again, this particular agenda item is just the lease between Thunder Mist and the Woonsocket Education Department.
Just for the benefit of our listeners, could you, either you or Mr. Perrier, just give us a snapshot of what the lease is, how long it's for, what the cost, etc., whatever we do with it?
I can take that one, Mr. Chairman.
I thought you would.
The lease is actually the amendment that's in front of you this evening. It's going to it's going to amend the original lease, and it's basically going to allow the lease to be renewed on a year-to-year basis unless one of the parties opts out. The original lease that was signed was a 10-year lease. There is no charge to Thunder Mist. Per the lease, there is $1 charge per year, but that's waived on a yearly basis. We provide space for Thunder Mist to operate in the high school, and Thunder Mist occupies that space, brings in the supplies. We cover utilities. Again, that's all not charged off to Thunder Mist. The benefits that Thunder Mist has provided far outweigh anything that we would charge them, and that's what we've done on a year-to-year basis.
Thank you, Mr. Perrier. Does anyone have any comments, questions regarding the lease for either Dr. McGee or Mr. Perrier?
Mr. Chairman,
Vice Chair Burke?
is Thunder Mist, are they here every day? Is that, are they on site every day?
They are, Mr. Burke.
Okay. I never, I'm on the Health and Wellness Committee, I've never heard this mentioned, and none of the nurses ever mentioned it. I guess it's a good thing. I mean, now, why would we need a grant for them if they provide the services?
It's Mr. Burke. It's the Thunder Mist that actually is applying for the grant to help subsidize the work they're doing in the high school. The grant does not come to the Woonsocket Education Department.
Right now, there is no grant for the high school for it. Correct?
Correct.
And this grant is for the middle school, possibly. Is that what I understood?
That's correct, Mr. Burke.
All right. I guess it's a good deal for us, but new to me.
It looks like they provide a pretty good service at a very marginal cost to us. I mean, the benefits far outweigh the cost that we'd be charging for utilities or incurring for utilities and the like. And when it comes up for middle school, let's put this on our agenda when we have the grant ready to go. Any other thoughts, comments for Dr. McGee or Mr. Perrier?
Mr. Chairman, for a second question?
Please.
Okay. What role do they play with our school nurses? Do they support the nurses, or do they, do they take the lead? I never. What's the dynamics between school nurses in the building and Thunder Mist? You understand that?
Yeah, so they work separately. So if a student needs to go to the nurse, as they would, on a typical day at the high school, if they're not feeling well, or a typical type, if they have medication that they take, which the medication would be held, in a locked cabinet in the nurse's office. Our nurses, our students utilize our nurses for those types of service. Anything, beyond that would be something. So any type of a service that a student or a family would utilize within the city at Thunder Mist is something that they can utilize instead of going to the location. In the city, they would actually be able to go to the Thunder Mist office at the high school and access those different types of services. Parents can make appointments there, with their child in school. So it's just much more accommodating for our families, and it's just another opportunity for our students and our families to access really, public health. And all of the positives that go along with that at Woonsocket High School.
And are the insurance requirements that Thunder Mist in the city also apply to Thunder Mist in the schools?
Mr. Burke, the Thunder Mist provides their insurance. They provide us with a certificate of insurance, a certificate of liability to the school department every year.
Well, I'm talking about the families that would come in and use the services. I don't know.
I'm not sure about that, Mr. Burke. I'm not sure about the insurance piece with respect to I don't want to guess. I'm not sure. I can find out and I can get you that answer.
I think that would be necessary, not just to know, but for the families and students who make use of Thunder Mist. So they know what's expected of them. That's why I asked the question. So, thank you.
But the liability insurance, if Thunder Mist, whatever they do, they need to carry that liability insurance, like all providers have to. So we've got sufficient. Do you have any idea what the amount is What's the coverage on the insurance, Mr. Perrier?
I believe it's $3 million. It actually is, it's included in the packet. I don't have the packet up in front of me right now. The certificate of liability you see is expired because that was what was attached to the original lease. We do have a new one now that's active right now, and all the rates are the same.
That's the key. That's the insurance that's key, because if something goes wrong, and something really goes wrong and suit is brought, I mean, the Thundermist has to have the liability insurance to cover their services. That's vital. So I'm glad to see that that's in operation.
It is $3 million. I have the packet here.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. McGee or Mr. Perrier?
Nope.
Dr. McGee, roll call.
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Leclerc.
Yes.
And now we go to our last item on the agenda. When on March 13th, when we were shut down and the world was turned upside down by the pandemic, we started holding our Google meetings on Google. We knew this was a short-term experiment, and fortunately that's worked out very well. And I want to thank Mr. Notoriani for making sure that pretty much things have gone very well with that. We've had some glitches where the superintendent was almost knocked out of a meeting, and other goodies that have occurred during the last year. But now we have asked all our children to come back to school in person. We want our teachers to come back to school in person. And it would be, in my opinion, almost hypocritical if we stayed out of the school system, that we did not hold our school committee meetings in person. And I think it's time to go back to Hamlet. I understand that we need to make sure that the venue and how we have to implement COVID regulations and requirements have to be in place. But I think it's time for us to consider going back to Hamlet live. And I'd like to do that by the end of April. Our students are in school now, and it would be nice to give that same kind of example by holding our meetings like we've done before the pandemic. So I open it up to discussion.
I agree.
Mr. Leclerc.
I agree. I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
what do you think?
I have some concerns. I think that we need to have a contingency plan, because if we have anybody who tests positive, we can't meet in person. We have to have all those contingency plans in place. So in other words, we have to have the availability to switch to Google Meet. And I don't know how we do that to comply with the open meetings law and posting the agenda and all that. I think we'd have to post it alternately and then maybe announce which way we're going. That's one of my concerns. My other concern is more personal, with where my mobility is limited. I'll admit this is a lot easier for me, but I committed, so I'm willing to try to climb that step onto the stage if you're going to require it of me.
We're not going to have you climb anything. We're not going on top of the stage, I'm sure. We're going to be pretty much the way we've been handling it in the past. And I'm leaving, and I know Mr. Notoriani and his staff have been working on this for some time now. And so that's that. Obviously, there are things that have to be worked out in the next few weeks. Mrs. Costa, what do you think?
I'm okay with coming back to in person, of course. You know, everybody else is in person, and I think I agree with Lynn as well. Well, Mrs. Kepiscus, I agree with her as well too, with just, you know, some concerns as well. If we're not able to meet in person because of somebody that we're around does test positive, or somebody in the school tests positive, and then the school has to get shut down. But I also agree with, you know, maybe if this may be better for Mrs. Kepiscus, maybe we could make it so that way she could attend virtually for certain times if she needs to. as well and keep our options open.
Well, the way I'd like to do it is, one of the things is exactly that point, though, is if we have to go virtual, as a school department, we've been doing this right along, where we've had some COVID cases, either we had to quarantine or, folks had to quarantine and everybody went virtual. So that's part of the planning that has to be done, and that all has to be worked out in a short period of time. So if it's not worked out by the end of April, I'd like to see it no later than the beginning of May. Dr. McGee, one of the things I had asked you, have you touched base with Chief Shatraw on this?
We did. Mr. Notarianni reached out to him today. I know that he had a conversation with him, just letting him know that we were contemplating coming back in person, and just wanted to make sure that, what we need to do to make that a reality. We're aware of all of the procedures that we need to follow. So we have reached out to him today.
What kind of suggestions or comments did he have? I'll ask Mr. Notarianni. What did the chief have to say?
Chief Shatraw indicated that while the council sits and meets in person, they have dividers up between them. They still broadcast it, I believe, and they do not have good and welfare. So members of the community do not come into the meeting. My understanding is that they wouldn't come and do good and welfare. He didn't elaborate as to whether they come into the council chambers. I suspect they probably don't. That's all he shared at this point.
City Hall is a very different animal because, as we know, I think the City Hall is still closed generally to the public. And they've been holding their meetings still now. They're holding it on Zoom because they're not allowed in the building. We, on the other hand, it's a whole different thing. So if we meet the requirements or the considerations and the limitations, then we should go ahead and do it. And maybe what we need is an overflow section, like you had mentioned to me, Dr. McGee. Maybe the gymnasium at the middle school can accommodate if we had a flow of people, because obviously the number of people that we'll be allowed to have in the room where we're sitting will be limited. But I still think it's a worthy process, a worthy thought to get us back at live. If our children are live in person studying, we should be doing the same.
Chairman, may I ask if there's any committee members that might want to volunteer to participate in the planning on how it would look?
I wouldn't mind.
And we need, Mrs. Costa wants to do it, and I'll do it. Mrs. Kapiskas, did you want to do this?
If you need me, I'll be there to try to figure out for people like me that have mobility issues how we're going to do this. I'd be happy to be involved. And if I may add, I just took a look. The executive order that currently waives the requirements of in-person meetings under the OMA expires the day after our next meeting, unless further extended by the governor.
Interesting. So because,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Do you think maybe we should not, we should consider the first meeting in May as being something we should shoot for rather than the end of this month? If it does.
Well, I agree. I mean, I would like to see what Mr. Notarianni's been working on this now for some weeks now, because I planted that bug. So if it can't be done, I agree with you. Then it'll be the first week in May.
Okay.
So we got the end of April or the beginning of May. But since we only can have 2 members, I mean, this is not, it's not a school committee. I don't know what, since our lawyer's on here, is it a violation of OMA if we have 3 school committee members on this committee? I think it is. So Mrs. Kapiskas, you'll be on the committee with Mrs. Costa. How's that? So you can take a look at it and working with Mr. Notarianni and Dr. McGee and even the chief. Maybe you can invite the chief over for those discussions so that we can plan it right. And again, we have to reach out to WWON. I don't know who's going to, typically we film it. It's recorded that way. I don't know, Estelle Bubble. I mean, all of that has to be considered before we go live. But I think it's something that we should consider for the end of April or the beginning of May. And this is something we're not voting on, but I think we got to get this up and running at this point. Any other thoughts or comments on this item?
Sounds
I'm going
good.
to thank you all for coming tonight. And so I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:25 PM. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Costa. Dr. McGee, please.
Chairman Bourget,
Yes.
Vice Chair Burke,
Yes.
Mrs. Kepiscus,
Yes.
Mrs. Costa,
Yes.
Mr. Leclerc.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Good night, and we'll see you next